if you don't want your camera to be on, this is a really good opportunity to put it off. The link to the recording will go out in an email to everyone who's registered, but not beyond that group. Do keep yourselves on mute. Please use the chat now to introduce yourselves if you haven't already, what growing space you're joining us from. It would also be really useful for Nemini to know whether there's any targeted groups of volunteers that you work with, or whether you're a family or young people orientated, if your space is an open community access growing space, those kinds of things. So any information that you'd like to just put in the chat would be welcomed now. And like I said, do use the chat function, put your questions in there. Nemini and I'll kind of do a bit of a combination of me jumping in with a couple of questions that I notice in the chat, and Nemini will also stop and ask whether there are questions about what she's talking about. So before I hand over to you, Nemini, I'll just say a couple of words about you. Nemini began her journey in community food growing at St Mary's Secret Garden in Hackney, which is a beautiful space. I think you've got over 40 years experience of gardening, which is amazing, and a background in visual arts, and your experiences including setting up school garden projects, working with what is now known as social farms and gardens, and all of that before moving to Core Arts, where you are now. And for those of you who don't know, I'll put a link in the chat in a moment. Core Landscapes is based in Hackney, award-winning. You can tell us much more about that in a moment, but also a trainer for the RHS, for ourselves, Capital Growth, and for the Recovery College. So Nemini will do a much better job of introducing herself and talking about her work, but we're really looking forward to hearing from you tonight, Nemini, about all your experience of engaging and working with volunteers in this context. So over to you. Thank you everybody for listening.
Hi everyone, absolutely lovely to see so many people here. I can see quite a few faces. Yes, as Fia said, my name is Nemini and I am the manager of Core Landscapes Community Garden and Plant Nursery. We're based in Hackney, and we are what is known as a Meanwhile project, which means that we have moved around four different sites over 3 different boroughs over the last sort of 9 years or so. And we moved to our current site in Hackney about 18 months ago. And the reason why Meanwhile projects exist, if you're not already familiar with the concept, is that projects like ours make the most of land that is temporarily available for community green space usage. So areas that may be under development, buildings have been knocked down, they're waiting for planning permission. So especially in London, and I guess in other big cities across the UK, you will find these little pockets of land which have just been locked up. You can't get access into them. But projects like ours and nearby projects to us in Hackney, I've noticed there's an XL member on here, there's one quite near to us in Hackney. We'll go in and open up those spaces and create really fantastic little community resources. This concept is really relevant to what we're going to be looking at today, because wherever we're based, we adapt to the community that is around us. So over the last sort of 9 years of managing Core Landscapes, it hasn't been a one-size-fits-all as far as my role goes, and my role has kind of changed at each location, because it really depends on who I'm working with at any one time and what the needs of those people are. So we've had to be very adaptive and very receptive to the people that we're working with. I'm going to share my screen now, hopefully. Okay, so I've lost all the lovely faces, can't see you now. So we're going to be looking at the 3 kind of key areas, which is engagement, staying safe, and by that I mean as much as mentally safe as physically safe, and managing expectations, both our own and the people that we're working with. So here's some images from Core Landscapes over the last 5 or 6 years. And as I mentioned, we adapt both to the people in the communities that we're in, and we adapt how we're growing, what we're growing things in according to the site that we're on. So if we've got a very, very large site, that might mean that we've got individual plots that people can come in and use for their own benefit. If we're on a small roof garden, which we currently are, we can't do that. So I'm constantly adapting the sessions and managing people's expectations a lot as to what we can and can't deliver on any one particular site that we're at. So I just want to do a quick little icebreaker to get your brains actively engaged with what I'm going to be talking about, because I really don't want this webinar just to be me kind of talking at you for an hour, because personally I think that's a very difficult way to digest information. So I would just like you, if everyone's got a pen and paper to hand, just to spend a couple of minutes just jotting down what you think makes for a happy project. Just a couple of things that you can put a few things in the chat if you want to do it that way. I just want to kind of get your brains thinking about it. 2 or 3 minutes. Is there anything coming up in the chat for you? Because I can't see it.
Oh yeah, enthusiasm. Happy project equals happy children. People working together, variety, diversity, togetherness, sharing, feeling like we're making a difference, collaboration, engagement, friendship. Oh, some really nice work. Cake. Oh, I like that. Volunteer satisfaction and feeling of achievement. Learning something new. Shared time and space. Realism, but dreaming too. Gosh, they're coming in too fast, Nemini. I can't read them. Sense of fun.
That's brilliant.
Loads of ideas.
Okay, excellent. Has anybody thought about their role within this? Like the person who's doing the coordinating. Has anybody mentioned anything about that?
Listening. Can you ask that question again, Nemini, and tell us what you mean by that?
If anybody's thought about their role, if they're the sort of if they're in the, I'm assuming, I mean, this is a big assumption on my part, actually, this may be completely not accurate, but I'm assuming the majority of people here are in the position of sort of volunteer coordinator, or kind of anchoring the project in some way, or
yeah, so
the project in some way.
And so people are coming into the chat with themes around holding the centre, encouraging, involving people, involving everyone, making sure people feel involved.
Has anybody mentioned their own well-being at all?
Oh, interesting. I don't know. Maybe not.
Okay, I don't want to spend too long on this, but this is very indicative of sort of everything that is going to follow on, basically. If the person who is anchoring the project is happy and content and feels looked after and feels protected and feels safe and feels valued, feels appreciated, feels not stressed, then fundamentally the rest of the project will unfold and also become a nice, happy, relaxed, engaging place to be. So in fact, just to get your brains kind of thinking in that way, I kind of want you to totally inverse all of the stuff that you've said, which is absolutely beautiful and totally true and really life affirming. But to actually just for a minute, to put yourself in the center of this sort of dialogue and think about how you are as a project leader, and whether you go into work every day feeling calm and in control and safe and relaxed, or whether actually as the day unfolds, do you feel a bit overwhelmed? Is it quite stressful actually? Have you got too much to do? Do you not have enough time to do it? Are you always trying to strive to do more than you can actually deliver on? It's impossible for me to sort of gauge what it is, but I'm assuming that for at least some of you, you may relate to that second sort of description of how things can actually, although we're on a community project and everybody thinks community growing is this lovely thing that we all do together and how wonderful it is, actually our roles can actually be quite stressful at times. It's often a very under-resourced sector. It often attracts people who very much put themselves last and very much everybody else first, which can impact very much on our mental health and well-being. So throughout the rest of this presentation, it's at least 50-50. I'm talking about the volunteer management side of it, as in other people, and at least half of it, you, which is what the sort of staying safe thing at the beginning, that's kind of what I'm alluding to. It's staying safe as in you feeling protected and safe. And that will be much like life in general, make for it. Oh, trying to get my slide down. Oh, my slide go down. Right. So, managing volunteers. Managing. Do we manage other people, or are we working with other people in a different way? Managing's got quite a lot of heavy connotations to it. So this little exercise, my second icebreaker, and then I really will get into the meat of it. How do you see your role? So if you could write down again, just a few quick words that describe your role in your project. For example, are you the organizer? Are you the coordinator? Are you the manager? Like, how would you describe your role within your project? Just give you like 90 seconds on this one. And again, if you can use the chat, that would be the most immediate way of sharing information.
I'll read some of these out to you then, Lemony. Persis and Catherine are facilitators, Ellie also. Wendy talks about communication, project manager, organizer, stroke volunteer, lead grower. So quite a variety, gardener and facilitator.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of, again, just sort of get it out there that as community growers working on community projects, actually the term manager or leader may be a bit misleading as to what our roles actually are about. And certainly I sort of see my role as a facilitation. I'm a facilitator. I'm trying to create an environment that everybody feels that they can have an input into. And I think if you can, yeah, the word manager is just managing volunteers. I always have like a bit of an issue with it.
And Lemony, it might just be worth mentioning that a couple of people have said that they're not that everybody involved in the food growing are kind of volunteering together. So there isn't a manager in inverted commas.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So everybody's kind of coming at it at the same sort of through the same pathway. Yeah. Okay. So within that context, how do we stay safe and engage and be clear? How do we create an environment that we're not going to burn out in, as in how are we developing our emotional resilience? Who are the volunteers and what are the roles? Who are we working with? How do we show the value of our projects and the work that we're doing? How do we reflect that back, both to the people that are coming to engage, back to ourselves, and back to our advocates and our supporters and our funders and all the rest of it? Like, how are we showing the value of our projects? And as we said, at the end, there'll be the Q&A time, and I'm really hoping that we'll be able to have some kind of open discussion as well about the things that may come up. but there will obviously, as Fee's already doing, interject if anybody feels very strongly about something that I've said, or really disagrees with me, or is picking me up on something that is, you know, that they're questioning, then absolutely totally feel free. I'm very happy to be interrupted at all the time. Hear my voice too much. So, and again, our own mental health. So if you can think, you don't have to write it down, you don't need to necessarily put it in the chat, but if you just like take just a couple of minutes just to look at these questions and just to think about your project. Can you answer these questions really easily? Is it really clear as to what your kind of remit is? What is your role and what's your purpose? What are your responsibilities? Are they actually realistic? Who are you engaging? Why are they coming to your project? And what safety nets have you got in place? Actually, I'm quite curious to know who can answer all these questions. So if you can, can you see a show of hands, Fee? If everyone puts their hand up, who can answer, not give me the answers, but who has got answers to all these questions? It's like a quick yes or no.
Can I see a show? No, I can't actually at the moment, but that might be because I am not in the right viewing option, because you're sharing your slides.
All right, okay, don't worry.
You just have, I can see, I can scroll through and see.
Sorry, what do you mean with safety nets? Can you give an example?
Okay. What would you do on your project if somebody came onto site and was acting in a really aggressive way? What are your safety nets to protect the safety of everybody on the site, including yourself? Or safety nets, safety protocols?
And there is, Amy's just reminded us that you can use the hand up function.
Yes, that's what I was going to do there for a quick, just sort of.
Yeah, I've seen one person use it. Oh, a couple of people have used it now. So that sounds like, yeah, people are responding and saying that they have got some answers to these questions.
Okay, great. So I'll just sort of give a brief kind of history of my role at Core Landscape. So when I started off in Canning Town, it was a very different situation to where I am now in Hackney. And I'm not sure that I could really answer any of these questions that clearly. It was only until I had been working in Canning Town for a while and I'd sort of got familiar with the community that I was working in, and I'd got to know people a bit, that kind of I could start to really sort of clarify all these things. And as I could clarify these things more, that bottom point, what are the safety nets, that became more and more clear as well as to what kind of parameters I needed to have in place on site and within the project to create a very safe and inclusive environment for us all to be working in. Come down. Sorry, it's like my things got stuck. Okay, next. And 9 years ago, when I was very, very green to sort of grassroots community engagement, I found myself in situations that maybe I was completely unequipped to deal with as far as level of experience goes. And I think I feel very strongly about this slide, because I think that in our sector, a lot of garden workers are expected to at least sort of dabble in some of these areas. And I think it can be very dangerous for us as workers to be expected to dabble in areas that other people have spent many, many years getting qualified in. And it's very good to be able to clarify as a garden facilitator, growing facilitator, what your role is, what you can do and what you can't do, and what you really shouldn't be expected to be able to do. So social worker, no, I'm not a social worker. I'm not from a social work background. I'm from a filmmaking background. No, I'm not a therapist. I'm pretty good at listening to people, but I am not a therapist. I'm certainly not a psychiatrist or a counsellor. Advisor, well, I might try and advise my friends, but I'm not going to advise people that I work with. I can signpost and give information and, you know, put people in the direction of somebody who may be qualified to advise. I don't want to be a referee. I'm a mum. I don't want to have that relationship on my project. And I'm not my volunteers' friends. I've got my own set of friends, and I'm friendly, and I'm very fond of a lot of people that I work with. But no, I'm not going to call them up at midnight if I've got an issue, and I wouldn't expect them to be calling me up. So it's, I think I've seen sometimes I see within our sector that kind of references that might allude to some of these things that we're expected to be able to do. And going back to the safety nets and staying safe is very much about clarifying what we can do and what we really can't do and what we're not. Don't know if anybody's got any
there's some really positive feedback,
like whether they want to respond to that at all.
I was just going to say there's some really positive feedback to this slide, Nemini, and I think what you're saying here resonates for a lot of people. If I could also just mention for a moment, Amy's been putting a little bit in the chat about using Zoom. Can I just kind of spend a second just letting anyone who isn't that familiar with Zoom know that if you put your cursor down at the bottom, you've got a number of options. Reactions will enable you to put your hand up if you hover over reactions, and obviously the chat function is 2 before reactions as well. Hope that helps, but I think Amy's maybe managed to respond to those.
Oh, and also with that reaction thing, if there's something that really is resonating with everybody, you can do like a thumbs up or a clap hands as well. That's quite good, just because obviously in this Zoom it's a very sterile environment to try and have these discussions in, so it's great if you can kind of show some visual reaction that we can pick up on. Is very useful.
And just coming back to the slide, Nemini, oh, I just lost it. Vicky was saying, you know, picking up on your point about signposting, and you know, just being prepared and having those resources and knowing how and who to signpost people to. Can be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, talking about clarifying what it is you do, this basically summarizes what we're doing at Core Landscapes. It's very much about promoting positive mental health. We are mental health, we're part of Core Arts. Sorry, I should have said this at the beginning. Core Landscapes is part of Core Arts, which is a very well established mental health charity that's been around for almost 30 years. And Core Arts is basically an arts centre that works with people that have been referred to them through health and social care routes, who are coming to learn whatever area of art it is, or horticulture, or sports, to promote their positive mental health. So a lot of people who are recovering from mental ill health or managing long-term mental health conditions, and certainly coming to Core Landscapes to learn skills that they can use for long-term self-care. So creating inclusive opportunities to learn about gardening and protecting the natural world for long-term for self-care. And we create pathways for people to extend further learning or to go into vocational, further training for vocational reasons. And we have very much focus on individualized learning. So by that, I mean that you identify when people first come to me, spend quite a bit of time talking to people as to what it is they want to get from the project, how they like to learn. So obviously different people will like learning in different ways. Some people like a very structured environment, other people like it much looser. Some people really like having handouts, other people can't read and write. So, you know, it's very much dependent on the individual. So again, thinking about your own projects, would you be able to right now, if we were in an environment where I could see all of you, would you be able to right now stand up and say, my project is this, 1, 2, 3? Like, could you do that? Just quick show of hands. Oh, I can see one little hand in the corner.
Yeah, we've got a few.
Okay, so if for those of you that are thinking, oh, not really, I would say this is a really necessary part of a successful project, because if you don't know yourself, kind of, you can say sort of 2 or 3 things, or even one thing that is your the driving force behind the project. It's very hard for these rest of these slides to actually be able to follow through with all the other stuff that I'm going to say, because if you're not clear yourself, you can't be clear to somebody else what the project is about. If you can't be clear to somebody else what the project is about, they're going to assume things about your project, and then you can potentially end up with a situation where you're kind of having to backtrack, managing people's expectations, that people are coming to you thinking that it's X, Y, and Z, when actually it's A, B, and C. So having that clarity makes everything else, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Everything else will kind of slot into place if you've got that clarity. So once you've kind of really clarified the essence of your project, then you can start thinking about or reassessing, re-examining the different pathways that you've got coming into your project. So again, this is very personal to my project. Every project is different. Everybody's remits are different. Everybody's purposes for their individual projects are going to be different. So obviously I can only talk about core landscapes. So I've got, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, so 7 different pathways into our project. And the first 3 are the kind of crucial, well, the first 4 are the crucial ones. So we're part of Core Arts, who work with people who've been referred to them through health and social care routes. So half of the work that I do, half of the teaching work that I do, I work with people who have been referred to me. And there's 2 different pathways for those people. Either they're complete beginner gardeners or they're not. So I have 2 different sessions, which I've basically developed over, I don't know, last sort of 3 or 4 years. And I've kind of honed the approach of the teaching and the sessions very much from the feedback that I've had from the people coming to those sessions over those years. So it has been a real 2-way development of the workshops, and it seems to be, touch wood, it seems to be working very well. So it means people can come in as complete beginners, and there's a clear progression route for them. They can do a term as a beginner gardener, learn sort of the basics of horticulture. I cover like 9 of the kind of key topics, and those sessions really help to build people's confidence. They get to be familiar with the project, they get to know me, I get to know them. And then when they feel ready, they can then join the progression gardening session, which then obviously builds on everything that they've learned so far. And then we go into further things like maybe more like planting design, looking at things like life cycles of insects, you know, things that are kind of go forest gardening, permaculture, things that are a little bit more involved. And then so those are on Thursdays. And then on Tuesdays, I have community volunteer sessions. And these are for anybody can apply to come and be a community volunteer. But my caveat is they're not suitable for beginner gardeners. So that is because I can't manage a big session with people that need a lot of support in those community volunteering sessions. I can in the beginner gardener sessions for the referrals, because it's a limited number of people. I work with support volunteers, so it's all very structured in that respect. I can't work on a small roof garden in Hackney We also have a street garden as well around the corner, which is Core Arts Members Garden. I can't work with beginner gardeners over different sites and make sure that they're being, learning, getting as much from the project as they could do if I'm not actually there with them. So that's why community beginner gardeners our sessions are not suitable for those people. And support volunteers are people who are really interested in supporting other people in their learning. So generally they're people who want to do this kind of work professionally, vocationally, or people who, generally they're people who are pretty experienced gardeners or pretty experienced working in the community sector. So they're bringing with them an awful lot to the project. I mean, everybody's bringing a lot to the project, but the support volunteers are there to support other people in their learning. So all these different groups, it's very clear to people what the groups are and what they're going to be getting from each group. And then obviously, I'm sure most of the people here have some connection to the corporate sector to try and generate some income for the project. So that's a whole other kind of area that I do. General public, on the bigger sites that we were at, they were open access to the general public. So obviously got all that to contend with as well. At Hackney, it's not open to the public per se. People can come in and buy plants on a particular day. They can come and book a tour for the roof garden, but it's not like open access, and that's because I can't manage it. The site's too small, especially with all the COVID restrictions that we've got in place now. So it's like, no, can't do that at the moment. And then I do quite a lot of sort of advocacy work with other projects, organisations and individuals as well. But that will be at a time that is not when I'm trying to deliver the first lot of 5 sessions. So over the years, it's got very, what's the word, sort of zoned, these different things that I do. When I do them, it's generally just me managing the project. At times I've had a second freelancer helping me deliver on stuff. And I do have a colleague who doesn't work with the volunteers, but he's responsible for a lot of the maintenance stuff, the irrigation, a lot of the building stuff. So he kind of takes care of that side of the project. And most of the time I feel that I've nailed it as far as not getting too stressed out. I can manage everything. Everything's, kind of ticking over all right. At times when it feels like, oh my God, I've got too much to do, I go back to this and I think, okay, what are the priorities? Where's the focus? Where should I be spending most of my time? Can I manage? Can I work with so many volunteers? Do I need to restrict the group a bit more as far as numbers go? So I'm always thinking back to myself and thinking, am I getting stressed or not? If I'm getting stressed, it's because things have just gone, run away with me a bit, and I need to kind of pull it back in, re-examine how I'm running the project and kind of bring it back to a point where it's all kind of manageable. And I know, because I can feel it, that if I'm feeling it is all manageable, that feeling ricochets right through the project. It ricochets right through the sessions, and you create a very relaxed environment for people to come to. So I don't think there's any advantage to trying to take on so much work that you just end up feeling completely harassed and overstretched by it. It certainly doesn't benefit you. And it really doesn't benefit the people that you're trying to engage with either. So a quick show of hands if that resonates at all with anybody, if they know what I'm getting at. All these burnt out community workers out there.
Oh dear, lots of hands, yeah. And I think maybe, Simon had something to ask, I think, but maybe didn't put it in the chat. I don't know whether he wants to unmute himself and say something. Maybe I got that wrong.
No, I didn't, sorry. I was just throwing out hands. I was just a bit late by about 5 minutes of a show of hands.
Oh, I'm sorry, Simon. I thought you were asking. I thought you were coming in with a comment. That's good. Great, thank you. Yeah. Lots of hands raised, Nemini, and Manisha had something interesting just an interesting comment. I don't know, Manisha, whether you'd like to unmute yourself and talk about it. It's not completely related to what Nemini was just talking about, but the idea of creating a non-hierarchical system in the context of working with volunteers. Maybe that's something we can come back to later.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just while I remember, I'll just sort of bring that in now. I think it's a fine line, I suppose, between being the one that is responsible legally, if you're a paid staff member, legally or through your employer legally responsible for everybody's safety and safeguarding and risk assessments and all the rest of it, but working in a very collaborative way. So ultimately the buck does stop with you. You are there, your role is to keep everybody safe, but you don't want to, or you're trying, or, you know, I personally am trying to create an environment where everybody feels that everybody's completely on the same level, so that what anybody's views are about the project, if people have got ideas, that's always encouraged, and that is how the project has developed, I think, really successfully over time, is that I've facilitated that happening, but that the project is the sum of its parts. It has developed from literally all the hundreds of people over the years that have made it what it is, and that only really works without that kind of flat structure, I think, personally. And you're getting the best out of everybody.
Thank you. There's a couple of specific questions about the kind of burnout, and maybe more specifically asking about the kind of practicalities of the sessions that you run, Nemini. Richard wants to know how many people are involved in each of your sessions. Is there a limit, and how is that limit managed?
Yeah. Well, currently I can give you sort of a pre-COVID and a current situation. So pre-COVID, my limit per session for people registered to a particular session would have been about 12, maybe 15 per session. And I'd be expecting maybe between 6 and 10 out of that to actually be turning up. So there'd always be a few more people registered for the session than would be coming every week. So obviously some weeks people are volunteers or they've got other issues going on, so you don't get 100% coming every single session. At the moment, well, me and Fee were just talking about this before the webinar started. It's a kind of ever-evolving situation. I don't have a definitive answer for this one, but I'm kind of limited very much by the physical space that I've got to work in, and being able to we wear our masks outside, and we're near a very, very busy road, so it's actually quite loud. So it's very difficult for me to teach with my mask on, with people sort of not all quite close together. So that is actually, at the moment, that is the biggest limiting factor that I've got, certainly with the beginners session gardening, because that is very much, you know, you're trying to, there's a bit more talking in those sessions where I'm giving people information. So it's about 6 now with those sessions. The community volunteer sessions, there's 2 different groups. One group has been coming for a very long period of time. Well, at least there's quite a few people in there who I know really, really well, and they know the project really, really well, and they can work independently of me. So I can spread people out a lot more, which means I can work with more people at a time. So that's more like 10. I can go up to about 10 in that group. So it's very flexible. But if I'm doing sorry, Fee, yeah.
Oh no, sorry, I was just gonna, maybe a follow-up question to that from Karen is, can you deliver drop-in sessions easily, or is that too stressful? And what's the minimum amount of time you normally ask people to stay?
Don't do drop-in sessions at all. And I'll explain what, well, I'm explaining right now actually, because that's what the slide is all about. Yeah, I don't do drop-in sessions because I don't know who I'd be working with. And I wouldn't feel safe doing that. Certainly historically, where I was initially in Canning Town, it was a very isolated site, very big, very isolated site. And I was on my own, I was lone working, and it's just not safe. Absolutely fundamentally not safe. I don't know if, you know, somebody literally comes in off the street, wants to do a session, don't know who they are, don't know what their background is. I don't know if they've got any issues. I don't know if they've got any history of violent behavior. I don't know if they're in crisis. Don't know anything about people at all. So it's not safe for me. It's not safe for them. It's not safe for the people around me. If you've got, that's not to say there aren't plenty of projects out there that do drop-in sessions, and they will have done their own risk assessment around that, or I'd like to hope that they have. I'd like to hope that people working in that situation aren't lone working. If you are lone working in that situation, I'd hope that you've got some lone working protocols in place to make sure that you are safe. Drop-in sessions, if you're, it so depends on where you are, what your remit is, what your project is, what you're hoping to deliver on, what are your safety nets, how many other people are there working around you? Are you working in, have you got a site where, you know, there's lots of people around you, lots of other staff members? All these issues are things that you need to think about. If you're working in a community where you've kind of got regular people coming through and you kind of know the faces and people become really familiar to you, then yeah, okay, that's a different sort of situation. But as a charity, as a project that requires funding, I'm talking about Core Landscapes now, you know, Core Arts is a charity, we've got certain legal obligations, we get funding via the NHS, we get funding via the community grant sector. The funders want to know who we're working with. So if you have a drop-in session and you're not collecting any data on people, you've got no evidence to show who it is you're working with, and you've got no control over numbers either. So it's tricky. I think it's tricky, drop-in sessions. I mean, I'm sure some of you, if we were in a sort of classroom situation, we could have a really interesting discussion about this, because as I'm talking, I'm thinking about, oh, actually, I know lots of drop-in sessions that I went to when I had little kids that were drop-in sessions, and that was like completely, totally fine. So obviously different situations for different projects, but no, short answer, no, I don't do drop-in sessions.
And I think,
yeah, sorry, go on.
Sorry, yeah, no, I just think maybe following on from that, Emily and Christine have both made some interesting points in the chat, which kind of relate a little bit to what you're talking about. Emily's talked about how she finds that sometimes they're doing more work to satisfy funders and looking for, you know, to kind of to do something new to fit their remit. Maybe that's about working with different groups of people. So yeah, just that can be stressful and feel a bit too much. And then Christine makes a point about that it can be frustrating when volunteers don't come back, and you just kind of don't have the retention, so they come in for a session but then don't come back again.
Okay, great.
So the investment in around kind of introducing volunteers but then not having the retention.
With both of those points, I would kind of go back to a couple of the earlier slides about clarifying the purpose of your project, and well, the stuff that I'm about to go into right now, actually. So as far as the funders go, I'm slightly off pat. I think everybody working in the sector can relate to the fact that you're having to jump through hoops, you're having to chase funding, and it can be incredibly frustrating and irritating. But the clearer that you are with your own remit, the easier it is to fit your remit into funding bids, because you can clearly see if a funding bid is relevant to your project, and you're not kind of trying to shoehorn your project into a funding bid that it's really not suitable for. And I can't remember the second point, but I'm sure it was a good one. But as far as, oh yeah, sorry, Fee, remind me what that second one was. Funding.
It was about retaining, well,
oh,
when you can't retain volunteers. Yeah.
So that kind of leads me on to this sort of the really dry stuff here, and I've realized I haven't even put an image up next to it. It's so dry, but super dry. But probably I would say these next two slides make it feasible for me to do the job that I'm doing at Core Landscapes. So when we're promoting the project to new volunteers or signage outside of our project, or whether we're talking to other organisations, we've got that clarity. We know what it is we do. We teach about gardening to benefit people's mental health. That's what we're about. So people come to us knowing that that's why they're coming. And then when people at the point of kind of say I've got somebody who's literally stumbled across the website or walked past the project and they want to come and volunteer with me, that's great. I'll say, you know, brilliant, that's wonderful, thank you for getting in touch. And then I will do either a chat on the phone, or I might have quite a bit of dialogue by email first, or people might come in and do a face-to-face thing. But then I've got my caveats with the community volunteers. So the first question is, you know, are you a gardener? Are you a grower? How much growing have you done? If they're complete beginners, it's like, okay, well, my sessions aren't for beginner gardeners, but I'll still find out, well, maybe they've got a whole bunch of other stuff that could be really beneficial to the project. So maybe they're super experienced in the community sector, or maybe they are very experienced in one particular area of growing. So I'll kind of get a sense of, you know, what other skill set they've got. But I'll also ascertain how much, if they're requiring professional mental health support at the time, like how kind of well people are or not, how resilient people may be feeling or not. That plays into the community volunteering sessions. The community volunteering sessions may not be suitable for everybody, even though they are experienced gardeners. And that process, that kind of first initial trying to get a sense of somebody in a form that that person feels comfortable with, is really critical with the community volunteering groups. And it's taken me a long time to sort of feel like, yeah, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing in this area now. You know, it's something that you kind of develop, I guess, over years of working with a lot of different people, because you have to, I don't like that word, but it's good to try to not bring yourself into the equation. So you're not judging people, you're not making assumptions about people, you're not second guessing people, you're literally taking whoever is in front of you on the face value, really listening to what they're talking about and thinking, is the project going to be able to give this person what they are hoping to get from the project or not? And am I able to keep this person safe and the rest of the group safe and me safe if they were to join the group? So those are the kind of, you know, that initial thing that I really have to think about. And then if I think that they'd be great in the group, and if they think, yeah, they really think that, yeah, this project is going to be fantastic, then we've got all this stuff that we go through, which is first and foremost code of respect. So I know a lot of projects have their sort of various different forms of code of respect, but that's all about, well, my caveat in the code of respect is we've got all the list of, you know, no racism, no sexism, no this, no that, no the other, any behaviour that affects the well-being of others. So that means that anybody coming onto the project is buying into the fact that there is a certain respect that everyone has for everybody else and for the project, and that everybody knows that if that is disrupted in any way, that's not acceptable. We're all there together to keep everyone safe, to look after everybody, to create an environment where everyone can feel relaxed and at peace when they're on the project. So people sign that. There's a registration form that's where I collect all the data, all the GDPR stuff. So all the name, address, age, gender, as people want to, how people want to describe themselves, ethnicity in ways that people want to describe themselves, what they want to get from the project, what their previous volunteering experience is. And then I have a question on that where it's to remember the wording exactly, but it says, is there anything that we should be aware of that will affect your choice of activity? So I'm not specifically asking for people's medical histories, but what I have found is that that is enough of a question that if people have got any specific issues, 9 times out of 10 they'll voluntarily give me that information with that question. So that's when I can kind of get more information as to whether somebody's emotional state is stable enough for that group or not, or whether they are on some medication that may affect their work, their activities. It may be medication that reacts to sunlight, it may be anything at all. So we'll get that information there. I have a whole load of stuff about confidentiality. We have a whole safeguarding induction, which takes about an hour for me to go through, which is all to do with the fact that we work with vulnerable adults, and the community volunteers will be working alongside or in the same space as adults who are being identified as vulnerable adults. There's a big thing about safeguarding currently as well. Obviously, we've got all the COVID protocols, and then we've got all the different referral routes that the different healthcare and social care professionals will come through. So it is a lot. It is a lot. And what I say to people before we do all of this paperwork, so in that initial conversation, I make it quite clear to people that becoming a volunteer at Core Landscapes does involve quite a lot of staff time for the induction process. So that initial conversation, it's worth spending a bit of time with that person to find out if you think they are going to commit to the project for a bit of time, or whether they are just sort of dipping a toe in and maybe not that, not that into it. And one of the ways that I kind of test the water with this is that I may not necessarily, somebody emails me or phones me, I may wait a little bit before I respond, partly because I'm just too busy. But that you can see how keen somebody is by how many times they come back to you, or how much information they're wanting to give you. You can kind of get a sense of somebody's enthusiasm or not. And at first, in the initial email or the initial conversation I have with people, if I'm going through all this stuff, I mean, if you're not that keen, you're just going to run a mile from all this stuff, because it sounds quite, it sounds like you've sort of, it's going to take a bit of commitment. But on the flip side of that, it's obviously people are volunteering, so you're not expecting people to be there necessarily every week for the next 3 months. But it's finding that balance, that kind of give and take balance, that they're buying into the project, you're utilising all their skills or whatever it is, and that it is a two-way thing, and to try to get a sense of that reciprocal nature of the project. I think if people start volunteering and they don't come back, it's probably to do with they thought it was going to be something else, that they thought they were going to get something else from it, and they haven't got what they were expecting to get, which again goes back to having that clarity of purpose at the beginning, so you can really make sure that everybody coming to you is very clear about what they are going to get from the project. Oh, that was a bit of a rant, wasn't it? Is that any responses to any of that?
About the code of respect, someone's asked if you if that's something that you would share with others, and or if not, like how would you advise projects to kind of come up with their own code of respect, I suppose?
If you I would love to share everything. My hands are slightly tied with this because I have to adhere to all the core arts procedures.
That's what I thought. So I suppose maybe kind of some advice about how other projects would kind of, you know, come up with their own code of respect and what kind of things they could draw on to do that.
Yeah, I mean, a good starting point is if people have got equal opportunity policies. So you're looking at creating a very inclusive and diverse, I was going to say workspace, but that sounds a bit heavy, environment to do wonderful and amazing things in. And you're trying to create a space that everybody's safety and well-being is protected at all times. So if you have those two things at the sort of forefront, I think there's actually I think one might actually be up on the Social Farms and Gardens website actually.
Yeah, I was thinking I'll put a link to Social Farms and Gardens because there are a lot of really useful resources there.
Yeah.
And actually on kind of related, Amy and I are preparing some resources specifically around kind of anti-racism and food growing spaces, but we're going to be publishing some of those resources shortly as well. Which,
yeah, I mean, and it's just that you're not treating anybody any differently because of their race, gender, sexual identity, religion, you know, any of those kind of key areas that we have in society, that everybody is equal, fundamentally equal, and that everybody has the right to work in an environment that they don't feel threatened or intimidated, or that they're being disrespected, or so things like offensive language, for example, or, you know, having a go at any one particular religion, anything, absolutely anything that affects the well-being of others at Core Landscapes is not acceptable. And with the code of respect, because you get everyone to sign that at the beginning, it's just, that's really clear. It's really, really clear. And I've, you know, in the 9 years or so of doing this job, I'd say it was only in the first year or so that I had any issues, and that was, you know, that was because I didn't know this stuff that well then, so I wasn't being that, you know, the project wasn't that clear, and also that I was picking up historical arguments that had happened between people before I was even in the role, so I'd kind of inherited this stuff that was going on, that, you know, that having to sort of play that referee role. But it's really good to for each project to sit and think about that and to work out, you know, what those things should be on there. If you take somebody else's paperwork with this, I think it's a little bit it's fine to have it as a guideline, but it's good to actually really think through all these things and maybe discuss it with the people that you're working with as well, and get different points of view on it, and make sure that you're kind of including everything in that you think is important. The other thing that we have on there is no drugs or alcohol on site at all. I mean, obviously drugs for medical purposes, but, you know, recreational. Oh, did my slide disappear? I know, sorry, my computer's been funny. Yeah, is that okay? Does that kind of answer that?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Nemini. And I've put a link to Social Farms and Gardens in the chat. I've also put a link to the COVID page that we've been updating regularly at Capital Growth, which includes some information about support with risk assessments and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say really quickly about COVID. So we basically, we are wearing masks outside. We're trying to spread out as much as possible, but it's not practical for us to stay 2 meters apart at all times. We just can't do the work that we're doing staying that far apart. We're not sharing tools. Everyone's wearing gloves. At the end of the day, at the end of the session, that particular session, we'll put all their tools into one bucket, and that's not used again for the following week. We've got one-way systems going through the building where the toilets are, hand sanitizers everywhere, we're taking the temperatures, and all of the Core Arts volunteers we've all had our first jabs, because we're considered to be health workers, not key workers obviously, but health workers. and all of our support volunteers as well have been able to get their first lot of jabs. So we're trying to encourage a lot of our members to get vaccinated when they, as soon as they're eligible to. So trying to kind of create an environment where they're being vaccinated is fine, is safe, and it's something that all the staff have done to kind of reassure people that might have various insecurities about getting vaccinated, just to kind of promote a really positive view on vaccinations. So other things to think about as far as when you're looking at your paperwork and your protocols and all this dry stuff, but very important stuff, is what are your crisis or emergency protocols? So at the beginning of the webinar, I was saying about the safety nets. So that, that example would be, what would you do if somebody was completely acting in a way that you just, not expecting? What are your procedures and protocols to deal with that? Lone working procedures. This sector is full of people lone working, and I expect a lot of those people haven't got any lone working practices in place. So there's lots of information on the web that you can look up about various procedures. And I think there's stuff on Social Farms and Gardens about that as well. I highly recommend going on a mental health first aid training from Mental Health First Aid England. I did I think it was a 3-day course, 2 or 3-day course, but really, really useful, I think, for anybody working in the community sector, and anybody, full stop, basically. And any additional mental health awareness training, particularly like if you're not specifically a mental health based project, but you've got open access to your sessions, then it's really good to have a really, really good understanding about different situations that you may find yourself in due to what people are experiencing mentally. First aid training, obviously it's really good to have a first aider on site, and health and safety training. So this is all the stuff when I'm saying about a safety net. This is your safety net. This and the previous slide, these are your safety nets. This is what is going to keep you safe and happy, and everybody else safe and happy.
And Nemini, I mean, I think you've answered the question partly, but Maureen's asking about how you kind of directly respond to unacceptable and inappropriate behaviour when it comes up. So presumably having those safety nets really helps with that, in those kinds of incidents. But have you got any kind of specific tools that you would
Yeah, we've got a whole procedure of what we do to manage a crisis, basically, which is kind of like a webinar in itself, really. But if you when I was drawing up R1, I just did a bit of Googling, although I was using Google then, but now I'm using a Cozier. Everybody, don't use Google, use a Cozier. And there's lots of really useful stuff on there. And if you look at if you go into sites that are about customer service, there's some really great YouTube videos about people who are working kind of on the front line of customer service, and who are in situations where they kind of can get abuse hurled at them left, right, and centre. So they're great. I mean, I have got somewhere in that lot, I've got a whole list of. I'll see if I can fish it out after Fee and send it on to you. I've got it somewhere where I've got links to all these different things. But again, if you go onto Social Farms and Gardens, if you look at CPD training, Capital Growth might have some or have had some in the past. So yeah, get yourself feeling confident about how to deal with confrontational behaviour, crisis, mental health crisis management, I don't know that word, but you know what I mean, and have it so that everybody that you're working with is on the same page. So one of our key things is when I was working on the site in Whitechapel, very, very densely populated area, open access site, And we went through a situation. What would happen if someone came in off the street, off their head, and started being really aggressive towards somebody? What would we do? So you need to sort of actually think about, well, what would you do in that situation? How do you keep yourself safe? How do you keep everybody else safe? Who do you call? What your emergency procedure is? How do you kind of clear that area out? All of these things. It's happened to me maybe like twice, but it was kind of preempted, so it didn't actually kind of go any further. It was kind of kept down because we've got all these safety measures in place. So I'm going to do a time check. Ooh, getting a bit dark in here. Oh, right, okay, I better speed up. So if you can just quickly jot down in reference, I know I feel like I've just gone blur with all this stuff at you, but if you can just jot down very briefly in reference to everything that I've said, actually maybe do it out of 10. Like out of 10 out of 10 is, yes, I know what you're talking about. I've got all this stuff done. It's totally fine. Don't need to do any work on a bit. So if you give yourself a 10 out of 10 for that, or bring yourself down depending on where you feel you're at with all of those safety measures.
Got a couple of 3s, a 5, a 6, a couple of 6s, some more 3s, 4s, an 8.
Ooh.
7 to 8, 4, 3, quite a variety.
Okay. Well, that's good. Then it was worth coming. Worth coming this evening.
A 6 working towards a 7. I like that.
And I must say as well, like all this stuff, I've been in the role that I've been in for a long time. So, we've developed all this over years, but to feel where we've like it's really all nailed. So, but I think having knowing who you're not working with and what you can do in a crisis situation, probably those are the two things that are most critical to know what the answer is. And so we've got a little bit of a breather. So any questions at all about anything that I've said so far, or anything else? I'm just going to turn my light on. Anything else that you want to just spend a minute talking about now?
I've noticed in the chat that Alexa's picking up on the point about aggressive behaviour again, and how to deal with that. What safety nets did you have in place to resolve the aggressive behaviour?
Well, it sort of stopped before it happened, if you see what I mean. The couple of times that I can think of, it was kind of a situation that was going, ooh, managed to kind of flatten it and bring it back down again. So it didn't get to that point of kind of blowing up.
And certainly there is also training available on de-escalation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which can be really helpful, I think. And
yeah. But I mean, a couple of the kind of key things on that area is to know in yourself that it's not acceptable for you to have to have somebody being aggressive towards you for a start. That's not acceptable. That's not okay. So if somebody is acting in that way towards you, they are not you. It's not a situation that can carry on. So it may just be simply you need to extricate yourself from that situation. It's like, if it's not, it's not acceptable and you feel like you're not equipped to deal with it, take yourself off, take yourself out of the situation, take other people away from that situation. That is kind of one of the kind of first and foremost ways of de-escalating, is just to not be there. Another key thing is to, if you're feeling very sort of grounded and relaxed and you're not kind of starting to feel really threatened by that behavior, you listen to what that person is saying. Actually, you know, maybe they've got a valid point. Maybe they're not being able to express it in a way that is not aggressive, but see if you can understand, listen to what is triggering that, and reflect that back to that person. I can see that you're upset. I can see that, you know, something is upsetting you. Let's talk about it, and try and kind of catch it and kind of bring it back down again. A lot can be with your tone of voice and how you're standing, all that, you know, the physical way. Keep a distance between you and the person. Don't come into their space either, because that's intimidating, or you're putting yourself physically in the line of fire. You want to stay out of kind of, you know, swiping, pushing away. But just don't feel, especially if you've not had any training on it, it's not acceptable. So just, you know, just take yourself away. It's not on. If you've done all the code of respect stuff, it's less and less likely that things like that are going to happen, because the more people feel that the project is that there are boundaries, very, very strong boundaries in place within the project, the less that is going to happen.
Lemony?
Yes.
Do you need to have the code of respect written out and displayed?
We don't have it displayed, but everybody signs one when they first come. So it's part of the induction process. Oh my God, that sounds awful. Process. You know, it's part of the point where people come and join the project. That's when we do all the paperwork. So we do all the chat. And I just, you know, and I just say to people, I'm really sorry, but I've got to do all this paperwork with you. And instead of people kind of rolling their eyes, going, oh God, paperwork, everybody feels, they're like, yeah, that's good. Because it makes people feel that they're coming to a place where these things are taken seriously, and it makes people feel safe. And actually the paperwork, I always think people are going to hate the paperwork, but that's me assuming that people are going to hate the paperwork. They don't hate the paperwork. It's fine.
So how many points do you have to put on the code of respect? I mean,
we've sort of see if I've got one to hand. I can, when we finish the PowerPoint, I'll come out of this and I'll pull up my one and I can just show it to you. But we've got about 4 main points on it.
okay.
So I'll do it at the, if you remind me, I'll do it at the end and I can just pull it out. Any other questions? Okay.
So I mean, I think there's been lots of interest in this idea of having a code of respect. So I think that's something that people will go away and think about how to kind of implement similar things themselves. But do you reinforce it at points throughout the volunteering program? So do you refer back to it? Maybe you've already kind of spoken to that, but presumably you do, and it's kind of just part of.
Maybe
not formally, but I suppose
but it's funny because the longer I do the job, the fewer issues I've got. I feel kind of sorry where are you saying this, because I'm going to set myself up for a fall, but I haven't had any issues for a very long time. And I think that's because I'm a lot better at reading people. I'm a lot better at being receptive to changes in people, maybe. So the more you, obviously the more people that you work with, just generally, the better you get at, and if you're observant and you listen and you have an affinity with people generally, which I expect everybody here does, because that's why we're here, the easier it is to second guess a situation. So, you know, people, generally speaking, most people, or a lot of people, don't just go out of nowhere. There's usually something that's happened beforehand. It's, you know, something may have happened before they come into the project. Something may happen while they're working that, you know, maybe two people just don't get on and something, you know. But if you're this is one of the things about not trying to work with too many people at any one time. If you're not spreading yourself too thin, you can kind of read the situation, you can read the vibe, you can be listening, you know, maybe working with this person, but you can be listening to see if, yeah, maybe those two people shouldn't be working together this morning. Maybe I'll get that person to work over there. You know, you can kind of be very receptive to how people are engaging with each other. And I always make a point, even if I'm in the middle of a kind of conversation with everybody, if somebody comes on site who's maybe late to the project, you know, I'll just take that second just to make eye contact with them. Oh, hi, nice to see you. How are you doing? Keep eye contact. How are you doing? I'm not just saying it because it's what we say to each other all the time. I genuinely want to know how you're doing this morning or this afternoon. A beat can be all it takes. And if you know that person, you can get a sense of, oh no, they're feeling really bad today. Or no, they're feeling great. You know, and then you know, I've got that in the back of my head. Oh, I know X is not in a great place this morning. And you can, you know, you take that on and you're kind of factoring that into how you're running the sessions, where you're placing people. So yeah, I think it's just a lot to do with experience and not.
C-E-R-E-A-R-T-S.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I think that's,
What is she still doing here?
oh, I think that's really interesting, Lemony. I think what you're talking about, a combination of, you know, lots of experience, but also working within a lot of, you know, having that structure, and that's the safety nets that you've referred to tonight. So I think that's really encouraging for lots of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sophie, you mentioned earlier that you wanted to mention about the digital divide and how our projects are functioning or dealing with the fact that we're living through a pandemic. So just very briefly, because I'm aware that time is running away with me, how we manage this situation at Core Arts and Core Landscape. So as I mentioned, Core Arts is quite a big charity. So we had the capacity at Core Arts and Landscapes and Core Sports to respond very quickly. This certainly isn't something that a really small project would have the capacity to do, but just so you know what we did. So we went online, as soon as lockdown happened, we went online within sort of a week of 2 weeks of closing our doors to face-to-face stuff. And basically all the tutors started making films. Luckily for me, I'm from a film background, so it wasn't too difficult, but I did have to learn editing. I never edited it before. So yeah, we put all our learning online. So we did like a whole load of different sessions. I did a whole load of different garden tours so that we had that online platform. But obviously a lot of the people that we work with don't have digital access, don't have internet, don't have data on their phones. So it's a real issue. It was a real issue for us, as it was for, I'd probably say, you know, the majority of our sector, as to, yeah, great, you've got this online platform, but you're working with people who don't use the internet, maybe. So Core Arts put in for emergency funding to give people laptops, to give people phones, to get people data. Packages were sent around to a lot of the members, so they were actually able to have the technology to be able to use those platforms. And then also at Core Arts, there was a lot of IT work, so giving people the opportunity to learn new IT skills again, to how to access the online, how to use Zoom, all the rest of it. So I guess the key things with that is to figure out who needs what with who you're working with, how do you do it, and then the troubleshooting. So obviously, like troubleshooting, by that I mean, well, what do you do when people can't actually access it? But critically, going back to looking after yourself, how much capacity have you actually got to do this? So working within a realistic framework, you know, it may just be that, no, you can't do online stuff, it's just too much, you can't do it, you know, it's too much to take on. So it's kind of weighing up what you do in an ideal situation, if you had unlimited time and resources to do it, and what you can actually do in real life, and getting a balance between those two things, so you don't, you know, kind of get completely overwhelmed with it all. Inclusive engagement is a little picture of my terrarium, which is full of lots of different plants living together. And so inclusive engagement, this I think can mean different things to different projects as to who you are wanting to engage. And again, it goes back to the code of respect, I think, really, and the clarity of your project as to who it is that you're wanting to engage. Are you particularly looking at a particular sort of target group of people or communities or situations or experiences? And being really clear about that. And then once you've got that clarity, maybe you've got a project and you're trying to work with single mums between the age of 20 and 25, but you're, you know, working with, I don't know, older people who want to learn about permaculture, you know, like you've got a completely different, you're not getting the people through the doors that you're trying to engage with specifically, or that you've got particular funding to engage with. So what do you do? I think it's really quite simple. You look around you in your community and you look at the organisations or the projects who are working with the people that you want to engage, and you ask them, you ask those people what they'd like to get from your project, if they're interested in joining your project, and you really make those connections wherever you are. Like when I've been in Whitechapel or Canning Town or Hackney, one of the first things that I've done when I've moved site, moved borough, is to look around and to see what is going on your doorstep, and to proactively look out of your project rather than expecting people to come and find you. And having that dialogue, asking people what they want, and then doing it the other way around. So you're not saying, look, this is what we're doing, come and work with us. It's like, oh, we're here, we've got this resource, what would you want, what do you want to get from it? Just flipping it. So any questions about any of that? Gone to sleep. So showing value and reflecting back. So I think this is a really important part of showing people who, it's almost like holding a mirror up to the people that are working with you. The term volunteering can be quite a distraction, I think. Some people are volunteering in that they are bringing with them a lot of knowledge, skills and experience they've already got, and they may be doing the jobs on site that nobody else wants to do. And I kind of call that volunteering. A lot of the volunteering, I'd say, is more beneficiaries, that actually people are getting at least as much back from being on the project as that they are giving, and that it is that reciprocal thing. But because of the term volunteering, often people come to the project thinking that they're only there to help the project, to do that voluntary work, when actually they're there because they want to get something from the project. That's why they're there. And it can take a kind of really deliberate question to have that sense of clarity for somebody. So, oh yeah, actually, after the morning coming volunteering here, I feel way happier than I did before I came. You know, and actually sort of saying, yeah, it makes you feel happy, doesn't it? You like the social side of it. So reflecting that back. And I think that's really useful for people, genuinely useful for the people that come to kind of have that awareness about themselves, and very useful for us, because then you can collate that information and show the funders. And I think it just makes for a really balanced project that everybody can kind of see the point of it. And also for yourself, like to reflect back on, actually, although my job can be pretty tough at times, and it can be emotionally quite, you know, you're giving out a lot, it can be very intense, it can be very full on, but actually it's hugely rewarding. I love my job. It's massively rewarding. I feel very privileged and lucky to be working in a job that I love so much, with, you know, working with people and plants. I love both. So like having that, being able to kind of reflect back all the time is, well, not all the time obviously, but yeah, it's a really good thing to be able to do. So just looking at my little thing here. So you clarified your purpose, you've protected yourself, you've engaged the people you want to engage. How do you show others the value of your project? How do you evidence the reciprocal nature of volunteering?
Nemini, I just want to let you know the time. This is I know that some people will, it is 7 o'clock, so I know that some people will have to drop out now.
Well, this actually is the last, this is the last slide. So hopefully from this webinar, you will have got at least some of these bullet points from coming. So thinking about clarifying your project, clarifying your role, protecting your mental health, clarifying your target beneficiaries, stroke volunteers and their needs, identifying your protocols that you need to develop, developing your remote engagement if you have the capacity to do so, clarifying pathways into your project, creating an inclusive environment, reflecting back, managing expectations, and is there anything else? And I just wanted to say about the reflecting back thing. So the way that we do that is we use the Warwick and Edinburgh mental health wellbeing scale. So that's specifically for people that are coming for mental ill health. We have skill set monitoring. So that's showing people just having like before a block of sessions, how confident they are on certain horticultural aspects. So it might be food growing, compost making, whatever. And then when they finished, after about 10 or 12 weeks, we get a sliding scale to see their confidence level building. We do case studies, which I write up from just having a sit down conversation with somebody. So I might sit and have a chat for 20 minutes and literally just have a chat about what they've got from the project, write that up. They make the best case studies. Prescriptive monitoring, so that's literally box ticking. You know, do any of these apply to you? Tick, 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 or not. And lots of space for people to comment, give feedback, direct the project. So a lot of, you know, people know that they can suggest something and I will try and make it happen if that's possible for me to do so. Finished.
Thank you so much, Nemini. There's been lots of really positive feedback in the chat about everything that you've shared tonight, and how I think it's going to be really helpful for lots of people tonight. I just want to say a couple of things before people leave us tonight. I know we've overrun by a couple of minutes, but Amy has really helpfully put the feedback form in the chat. We'll send that round in an email also, along with not Nemini's slides, but with the link to the recording, so you'll have access to that, and you can go back to the bits that that you found most juicy and that you want to revisit. But yes, thank you again, Nemini, for sharing all of your experience. I think it's been really helpful. And we have, I've put the Core Arts website in the chat as well, but by all means get in touch with myself and Amy at Capital Growth if you want any more follow-up information, if you want any signposting to some of the links like Social Farms and Gardens that we put in the chat and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, thanks again. Thank you everyone for joining us. We've got a few sessions coming up over the coming weeks. We'll be sending our next newsletter at the beginning of next week with all of that info, and hope you can join us then. Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye everyone.
Thanks. You can see the chat now, Nemini.
Yeah, I was just looking at it.
It's weird when you can't see it, isn't it?
Yeah, because you're just like working blind, aren't you? It's like...
All right. Are you happy to stay on for a second, Nemini?
Yeah, sure.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to stop recording as well.